So, hi folks, on behalf of Sky Mumbai team, wishing you and your loved ones a healthy, prosperous, and fulfilling year ahead. With our first webinar of 2021, we are introducing a new series on product management where questions related to product design, management, how to reshape it for stakeholders, that is your investors, consumers, etc., and how to scale it, etc., will get answered. For this session on building a world-class product, we'll introduce and welcome our three experts. Firstly, Sandeep, who's going to be the moderator for the day. Sandeep is a former entrepreneur and seasoned executive with expertise in building and scaling business across multiple industries. He is currently heading the fintech of Amazon's cloud business. He is also actively involved with TiE Mumbai as a charter member and fintech SIG. Secondly, Naman, who is the co-founder and CEO of Refrens.com, a marketplace for freelancers and agencies. He has been part of early teams of Freecharge and Zipdial. He has also invested in few startups including cashfree, Dailyninja, Walrus, etc. Third, Kanjan, who is a product manager with Razorpay, working on engagement and servicing aspects of Razorpay X. She has worked with Bain and Vodafone Idea Limited in the past and has attended the Indian School of Business and NMIMS University. So welcome you all, and Sandeep, please take it ahead.
Thank you so much, Trupti. By the way, I just noticed that you hesitated at the word executive for me, so I will note that for future.
That has nothing to do with that.
All right. Hello everyone. Welcome to our first series in 2021. So quick, some quick notes before we get started. Number one. A lot of the questions that we'll ask today are based on the questions that you sent in. So we want to continue to keep this as interactive as possible. And hence, as you have questions, please share it, send the question across, because those questions will come to us and I'll be able to ask the audience, our panelists as well. So when we get started, the first question to get started, and the first question for Naman and Kanjan. My first question is around, and we've seen a couple of people actually ask about this. When founders typically start building their startup, their initial product, they are typically bootstrapped, they have less funds, but they want to build the best product possible, right? So how can founders go about it, and how should they go about it? So I'll go to Naman first, and then I'll come to Kanjan.
Hey Sandeep, thank you for having me. So, when you're talking about a product, you start with actually a problem, right? A good product can be made if you understand the problem well. And if you are the end consumer, right? If you are the one facing the problem, then it becomes a lot easier, right? So if you look at a lot of popular products, you will see that the product manager or the entrepreneur, they have lived the problem, and hence it is possible to know what solution will work, right? If you are in a silo, if you are very disconnected from the problem or the environment of the problem, this will not be possible, right? So assuming you are not the target audience, right? Suppose if I am creating, say, a fintech startup for, below poverty line people, right? And I'm not the end consumer. You have to talk to the end consumer, right? And one cannot emphasize enough of how much you need to talk and what filtering you need to do. And when I say talk, I'm not talking about your 5 or 10 conversations with 5 or 10 people. This is like at least like 100, 200 people, and you will find new problems around your original problem statement. Okay. So I'm not sure a lot of you know, Flipkart actually started as a price comparison engine and not as an e-commerce company, right? And these kind of things happen when you actually talk to customers and you realize the problem statement in the market is very, very different from what you set out to do. Maybe the market is same, but the problem statement is different. So if you just talk to the user, or you know the user very well because you are the user, then that's your first step towards creating a great product.
Interesting. There's actually so much truth into that, with saying that, if you are the user, it's easier to build it. And if you're not, you actually have to speak to the customers. I'm going to bring in Kanjan over here, because Kanjan, at Razorpay, you build products for others, right? What is your thought on when you're building products for folks, I mean, when you're not the end user, right? It's somebody else. How do you go about it at Razorpay?
Right. So, first I'll answer the immediate question that you've asked, and then I'll again touch upon the bootstrapped part of it. So, how it works at a large company, because now Razorpay is a huge organization, and especially we are a B2B company, right? So, our customers are not customers who'll go on, let's say, social media or on different platforms and communicate. It's a very targeted communication, and the problems are very specific to businesses. So we have to firstly segment the customer cohort into different categories, right? It can depend on the industry that they work in, the size, the persona that are actually using Razorpay's products. Sometimes a finance persona is using, whereas sometimes an owner or a entrepreneur who's running the business is using. So we have to understand that which are the personas which are using and what are their particular pain points. So this can happen both from analyzing data of our existing products, because more or less the new features that we develop are extension of the following products, or the core problem that we are solving, or the core segment that we are in remains more or less an extension of what is existing. So we analyze the data, and of course, yes, we have to talk. Even being a product manager, I usually make 10 to 15 sales kind of calls every single day, and a lot of my customers think I'm a customer service representative. Sometimes they call me up for follow-ups on their tickets. And it's fine, right? It really gives me a lot more insight than data could have ever given me. Second, it helps me to build a personal relationship with my customers, so tomorrow when I'm developing a product, we are huge on early access programs and beta programs. So a lot of products at Razorpay are actually made by direct feedback or direct suggestions from our customers. So that is the point on the first question that you asked. The second thing is, how does one leverage whatever resources they have to make a bootstrapped venture successful, right? So how I look at it is that right now, the day and age we are in, we have a lot of uh, available resources for which we don't really need to hire people, right? So when you're a bootstrap venture, you don't have the money, you don't have the time to go about and hiring people or hiring or buying certain softwares. That's when you leverage the networking effects. You talk to individuals, you understand quickly how does for example, let's say if you want to code, or if you want to make an app, you quickly talk to a friend or a professional, how does a mobile app development work like, and learn a couple of skills here and there, or maybe collaborate with your friends and your peers to make small pilots, which if they are successful, then you know that for sure your idea is valid, or get it validated from the customers, as Naman also touched upon, and then build bigger, right? So build faster, fail faster, and then uh, build more on that is the way to go.
Yeah, I would also add fail cheaper, right? So
Yeah,
uh,
fail.
one of the first things you want to do is, like, if you have to build a product, you need to have a tech platform. Like, and just, a selfish plug here. So AWS has got an Activate program, and typically the Activate program, used to give funding only if you raised funds from like a seed or a VC firm, right? Now we have something called a founders program, right, which is actually based for early stage founders. So if you go to AWS Activate and go to the founders program, you'll actually see that, even as a founder, all you need is like very basic stuff like your own custom domain and a decent web page. You can actually get like $1,000 in AWS credits, right?
Right.
Which means your tech cost for building an MVP also goes away, right? I want to come back to a couple of points you actually mentioned, Kanchan. But the first thing I'm going to ask is, um, you mentioned, talking to customers, right? So is there a number of customers, if you're building a product for somebody else, right? Or even if it's a product for you, but you just want to validate the idea, right, among others. What is the typical number of customers that a founder should speak to validate that his idea and his hypothesis is correct?
Okay. So I don't think anybody would be able to give like a number, but the formula that I adopt personally is that let's say if I talk to 10 customers, and till the 10th customer, I've received different ideas and different complaints and different feature plugs. Then I take all of them and then I talk to the 11th customer. If that 11th customer's feedback is somewhat similar to one of these 10, I know that there is like a repetition of one problem. So that's how that one problem is picked up. And then I keep talking to more and more till at least there is, for each problem or for each idea, I have at least a few. And when I say few, it depends on the scale of your product or how many personas or how many customer segments is going to impact. But at least for each feature, idea, or hypothesis, if I have 3 to 4 validations or 3 to 4 reiterations from customers, then that's how I make the size of my customers that I need to talk to for that particular thing. And if at all I gain some fresh perspectives along the way, then of course they are well accepted.
Naman, do you also do the same thing when you have built your product at Refrens?
Right. So again, as Anjan said, there is no one particular number, right? You are basically looking for more information around the initial hypothesis. So assuming, I go ahead with a hypothesis when I'm talking to customers, what I'm trying to figure out is my, the persona that actually needs this solution or which has this problem, is it narrowing down or not? Right. For example, if I start with, say, I'm going to build invoicing software and all the freelancers are going to need it. Right. When I start talking to customers, I might realize that, say, a freelancer in a particular profession, say a CA or a law or accountant, whatever, they don't need it. Right. Then I say maybe designers need it. Within designers, is this category really broad, or even within designers, I'll say, designers who are just starting out need it, or designers who are already experienced, they need it. That is what you're trying to figure out. See, if you've come up with a hypothesis, you will always find at least one person who believes in that hypothesis, right? Because it's not like some magic that has come right from somewhere. You know at least few people who know this. What you have to actually validate is how big is that audience, right? Is it, if it's a, on a current product, if you're trying to build a feature, do only 2% people need it, or actually 20% people need it? That is what you're trying to validate. And that 2% and 20% also depends on whether you're trying to optimize revenue, you're trying to optimize engagement, acquisition. What are you actually trying to optimize, right? So if I'm trying to optimize revenue, probably I'll even do a feature that 2% people need, right? If I'm trying to optimize engagement, maybe 2% is not good enough, right? So that is how I look at it.
Interesting. And how do you find out when you have reached that sweet spot of product market fit, Naman? So when you're doing this, speaking to customers and developing the product, when does it click that, hey, I think I've got this figured out?
Okay, so there are two things. A, is someone really willing to pay for this even before it is live? Okay. After it is live, are people requesting you to add new features? Okay. If your product, feature growth of product, general product growth is only limited by the number of engineers you've deployed, it means you have a product market fit, right? People are coming back to you, requesting you for more features. A, they are using your current tool. B, they trust you that you can build upon the current tool, and they really have more problems around the core problem that you selected, right? So that is when you know that you've actually found a product market fit. If you keep going to new customers with the same story, right, with the same feature set and trying to convince, people are bouncing off. They're using it for once, but they are not being retained, right? That is where I think, the product market fit is missing, right? So first time you can incentivize, get people to use, but if the second time you still have to incentivize, you have to remind them of your product, then there is a problem in product market fit.
You mentioned get people willing to pay for it before the product is ready. Yes. But at which stage? Are we talking at the pure hypothesis stage where there's just a landing page up, or is it when the product is in alpha or beta? When exactly do you go to customers and say, hey, are you willing to pay for this product?
Landing page is good enough, right? Landing page, if people are ready to sign up, people are ready to talk to you on phone, maybe I'll pay $1, maybe I'll pay $100, whatever, right? I think landing page is good enough to actually validate, because everything beyond a landing page is the real product, right? Which you can always hide behind a login interface, right? So if the landing page is convincing enough, if it tells your story, then you know whether, and maybe sometimes your landing page is wrong. It is not communicating the product that you want. But then again, that is also part of the product. You might have a great product. If you're not good at making landing pages, you'll still fail, right? So, a landing page is generally a good enough stuff, because the user is deciding in your absence, right? They're looking at a landing page. They're not talking to another human. If I go to a friend and say, do you need this? They are probably hesitant and they'll say yes, right? That's like a false positive that I'll get. But if I just give them a link without even telling that I made this, I give them a link and saying, do you think this is interesting? If they get back to you, if they get excited, it means they really need
it. Interesting. Very, very interesting. And, just moving a little bit to Kanjan now. Razorpay has launched a lot of products, right? So I'm interested to know, as a product manager, right? How do you track whether the product is being built is being successful or not, right? So what are the metrics you typically use to identify whether the product is successful or the creation of the product is successful?
Right. So we, and not only we, but any product manager building a product without having a clear understanding of what metrics are they going to track is a failure in itself, right? So it's possible that the metrics might not be as expected, but you should have an idea of what metrics you're going to track. So how I look at it is from three aspects. So first is whether the product that we've built is getting adopted or not, because as Naman mentioned, right, they might come up, they might sign up for whatever incentives you've given them, or just a marketing campaign impact or something else. But then are they actually adopting the product, right? And when I say adopting, are they committing to signing up? Are they completing the flows? Are they dropping off in between, etc.? So the entire journey from being aware about the product to actually adopting it, that's the first metric. And there can be multiple metrics depending on whether it's a website feature or whether it's an app. So for example, if it's a mobile app, we'll see how many downloads are there, how many actual signups are there, how many KYCs are complete, etc. So that'll be that part of the metric. The second metric would be usage. So after adoption, we do experience that a lot of companies, a lot of merchants, they just they just test the platform by making initial few transactions, and then they somehow face any issues, or they just don't feel that the product is the right fit for them, and they fall off, right? So the second metric is what is the usage, and that can be anything from daily active usage, monthly active usage, number of transactions that they make through that feature, number of conversions, etc. And the third is actually repeated or retained users, so retention and engagement, right? So that would involve anything from the clickstream data, how is their interaction with the product, to sharing of the product, to maybe using it from different platforms. So these are the three main pillars that we see. And obviously the biggest metric, which is like, we call it a negative metric, but actually that is also very important, is the churn. How many are just dropping off and leaving your product. So this is how the entire metric stack is working for us.
Thank you. So we have a couple of interesting questions from the audience, kind of challenging what you guys said earlier. So I'm going to I'm going to go to that because that's interesting. So first one for you, Naman, is from one of our audience, Chandramoli. He says, if MVP is not a must before going to the customer, does it imply that if we are able to do that, we get a validation for the idea? And does it really work? Does going to a customer before having an MVP, does it really work?
Okay, so there are two things to this, right? A, you are trying to validate a market, and B, you are trying to validate a product. Okay, so when you're talking to a customer without the product, you are actually trying to validate a market. Is this even required? Am I even running in the right direction? Right. But when you're trying to validate a product, you must need a MVP, right? Because the whole packaging is what they are saying yes to, right? You sold me a vision with words or with landing pages, etc. But your product does not translate to that, right? There are a lot of products which actually fly based on micro interactions. For example, Tinder, right? There were dating apps before that, right? But Tinder probably had this left side swipe, right swipe thing, and which is what is popular about Tinder, right? So I cannot say whether I like it or not without actually experiencing it. And that is where that MVP is required to validate the product. Okay? You can validate the market without an MVP.
Interesting. Very good differentiation, by the way, between the product and the market, right? Now, the other question is for you, Kanjan, and it's from Ashok. And what he talks about is, let's say you got this segment figured out, right? The market figured out. You know it's correct, and you built up a good product. But what he says is a lot of success of the product is also depend on publicity and marketing. And if you don't have that, then your product essentially fails, right? How do you overcome these? How do you overcome or how do you address these problems proactively for making sure your product actually succeeds?
Right. So the best solution and the most easiest solution for this is that the product manager or the product creator gets involved in the marketing, right? Because the story and when I say get involved is basically chart out the go to market strategy, and that is part of a product manager's job description in some companies. Somewhere it's not, but I definitely recommend that it should be, because till the time a product manager thinks of the, we have a thing called PRFAQ, which is the press release frequently asked questions. So we are supposed to make that, because that will give us an idea of what story will go to the actual customer from the marketing or the PR teams, and is it really meeting the actual product offering that we are making. If there is any gap in that, or if there's an overcommitment, or if the story is too glamorous but the product is actually not giving a lot of those things, we are in for a definite trouble, and that actually would lead to some maybe some negative publicity also, which is not good for a product for sure. So then first is to get involved. Second is, whenever you're talking to customers, right, that is when we make something known as user stories. So these user stories are the ones that you're going to use to actually market or pitch your product, and these user stories should definitely come from the user. So today if the user says that I want to make my payouts on the go when I'm sitting in my train, right, this should be the pitch that we give right back to them, and that's how we know that it's definitely going to be a success and not give any wrong impressions or a feeling of incomplete offering to the customers.
Got it. And you mentioned about the PRFAQ. Can you kind of double click and
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about our audience? What is the PRFAQ,
Yeah.
and and how you use it?
So PRFAQs, they are basically, they are like it's a short document, not a very huge document. It has three main things. First is what is going to be the pitch, or what is going to be that one executive summary of that product that's going to go in the press release. So if today I'm writing a document for my product, which is typically a product requirements doc, I should know that after the rollout of this product, what is it that the press is going to be informed about it. So that is one paragraph. It will have everything, right, from the features that are there in the product to the to what the problems it's going to solve for the customers, etc. Second part is the customer questions, or the external FAQs as we call it. Now these external FAQs are something that you put up on your website, right, in the FAQ section. So what are the questions that will come to your customers which you are not answering in your, maybe your web page or landing page or the product itself. So any such question, or you just want to clarify it more, you put it in the external FAQs. And then the third part is the internal FAQs. These internal FAQs are what your team members are going to ask you. So today, if you're a product manager, you are going to interact with the sales team, marketing teams, engineering teams, strategy teams, and some more teams, if depending on the organization you are in. So all of these teams will have their own questions. For example, sales team might ask me that how much percentage of rollout are you going to do in the first month, and how many customers are you going to touch, what is the revenue increase that you're going to expect, or how do we ensure that the correct cohort is targeted in our sales efforts, right? So these kind of questions, and of course about the product features, all of these will come under the internal FAQs, and all these three make a part of your PR FAQs. Usually we prefer to write it in the begin, like in the initial stages itself. even though it seems like an end user doc or something that should come out after the rollout, but you should have that much clarity about the product right in the beginning. So this comes in the initial stages.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Amazon does the same thing, by the way.
Yeah.
And so it's in fact, Jeff says that it's the other way around. You should not be creating a product and then doing the PR. You should be doing the
Yes.
writing the PR first, right? Because PR starts from the customer. So we create the whole PR document. It's actually discussed within the team, right?
Yes.
So people can give inputs. And what that does is it increases the probability that the product is actually useful for the customers. It also makes sure that you're addressing almost every angle that you can think of, at least for the first version. So yeah, we use that in Amazon as well, and it's very interesting to see that Razorpay as well using that.
Yeah.
You also spoke about user journey, and I want to bring in Naman as well over here, Naman and you both of you on this, on how um, you said you chart out the user journey, right? So how do you chart it out? What is there a particular methodology do you use? Do you use like wireframes and screenshots, or do you go via the behavior of the customer? So what exactly do you do?
Right. So the way I do it is I write down steps. Okay, no wireframe. No. I don't involve a designer early on. I just write down steps saying this is the entry point. This is what I want them ultimately to do. Right? What are all these steps required? And is this step adding value to the end result, or is this like a friction to the end result? Right? And then you start either adding things or removing things from there. Right? That is how it generally starts. Once you start designing, you will realize probably there are a couple of more screens you will require, a couple of more steps you will require, because maybe the end output, the steps that I've written down doesn't capture the end output, right? But the idea ultimately is that, from the point they've entered to that aha moment, how short is that journey, right? So I'll give you an example, in my product, creating that final. So we give out a free tool to freelancers to create invoices, right? What they ultimately want to see is a PDF that has all their data, right? Now, what we try to do is on the landing page, we give them a PDF. This is how it will finally look like, right? They have to do all the hard work of entering all the data, and only then the thing will come in, right? What we've removed is the registration step, right? We ask you your email address as part of the invoice, and we've removed the registration step. We say that we'll send you your password via email so that your first PDF is ready. Anything that the user doesn't think is required, right? If the user doesn't think a password is required here, I will not ask for it, right? If the user think I want to mention my phone number on the invoice, I will ask for it, and now I'll use that for my user registration also, right? Or even if you're adding steps, you explain it to users. So I remember, about 11 years ago when we designed Freecharge, we actually mentioned why we are asking your address, right? Because a recharge website shouldn't ask your physical address, right? We actually mentioned, this is where your coupons will be sent. So make sure you put like a valid address, right? And city and pin code, etc. So we actually got very valid data. We had like a 99% success rate with our couriers, right? Which was, because we mentioned that this is why we are capturing your data. But otherwise, people get very wary, right? And people get scared saying, why are you asking for this data? And again, with steps also, right? If they think that this step is not required, they will drop off, right? So just reduce that time between the entry and that aha moment, and it will happen, right? And once the product is live, then you measure where is the user exactly dropping. A lot of times, you have a different copy in mind, and the user actually does not understand that copy, right? For example, when we create pages right now, we interchange words like agency, freelancer, and expert, right? We realized vendors don't call themselves experts, right? But the clients want to talk to an expert, right? So that terminology difference is very different in buying side, selling side, and these kind of things you can only get when you start measuring and you start talking to your users, right? And otherwise, this was like, I thought everybody calls themselves like a ninja or an expert or whatever, right? Superlatives, right? And that is what we said, are you an expert in this? And people say, no, I know this skill, but I'm not really an expert, so I shouldn't sign up here, right? So Those kind of stuff you only get when you start measuring in detail.
Right, and you also get to know them only when you speak to your customers, right?
Right.
One of the things I see with early stage founders is many of them are very shy to speak to customers before they've created their products, which I honestly, customers are not going to eat you up. Go speak to them. If anything, it will help you. Like Naman and Kanjana said, it'll help you validate that the problem exists, and to a certain extent that the solution that you're working on will actually exist, right? Um, Coming back to that user experience that you spoke about, I find this very interesting that you literally detailed every step that on what your end users go through. So did you kind of look at how some of your customers use it? Like, I know what some startups do is they give the products they call some folks into their office, or at least this is pre-COVID, give the product in their hand and they see how their products are used. Have you guys done something like that to identify where the users get stalled, or is it purely through data?
So we've done those kind of sessions, okay, where especially, so even before we attempted the product, we knew that these 20 people are going to adopt our product, right? I mean, just for the sake of friendship or whatever, right? They're going to adopt our product. And then we used to, record their screens live, over a video call, and then show it to the designer, show it to the programmer, saying, this. And a lot of times what we found is maybe the design is right, the copy is wrong, right? I mean, and the copy is the comprehension, right? I mean, you want to put a continue button there, submit button there, or a done button there. That itself changes the behavior of the user, right? And I think that was like the biggest surprise for us. And we think like, the most powerful button is the next button, right? I mean, if there is a pink color button or a orange color button, it is like the affirmative action button, right? But the copy on that button actually confused people, right? So I think it is important to look at it. I'll give you another anecdote. When we launched Freecharge, I went to IIT Bombay and told a lot of these, first year students about Freecharge. And what we realized is their debit cards were not enabled for online payment. They did not have a CVV code back then, 2010. So I actually sat down with them. They gave me cash. I gave them my credit card number, and they swiped and they did the transaction. Right now, that kind of information saying, students in colleges don't get, if I'm looking at any kind of video or whatever, right? I mean, they would go to the last screen. The debit card information is asked on a payment gateway, page. They're not asked on my page. I cannot look at any video. I cannot look at any data, right? So a clear drop off, right? So again, it again boils down to, are you talking to your user or not? They will give you more information than the clickstream data or the, any kind of screen recording or any other stuff, right? They will basically make it very, very easy for you, right? Instead of trying to analyze 50 things, they'll give you those stories, right? And that will probably give you more insight about, what the journey should have been. It's not like minor improvisation on the current journey. Maybe I did the whole journey upside down, or, just added too many steps, right? So if you talk to users, you realize maybe a simpler product was possible.
Understood. Talking about building products, right? I've got two very interesting questions here, and in some way they kind of contradict each other. So one question says, from one of our audience members, it says that I'm not able. There's so many products out there. I'm not able to get any new idea. Should I just copy somebody else's product, that's successful, and make my own product? And we have another audience member who's actually asked the question that, how do I guard myself from duplication of my product? So I want to just, keep this open to both of you.
Right. So I think on the first part, right, that all the ideas are taken, what do I do, right? Should I copy? The answer is yes. Okay. Copy for a particular audience and make it better. Okay. What that means is, assuming there was JustDial, some 13 years ago, and Zomato started about, I think, 12 years ago, right? Now, JustDial had all the phone numbers and addresses. Zomato said, only for restaurants, I will also add menu. And that was all. That was the first product of Zomato, right? It was JustDial plus menu, right? And that made it a little better for all the, dining out users. And that gave them like a foothold in the market, right? Now, when you search for a restaurant name or say, some kind of collection page saying, Chinese restaurants in Connaught Place, Delhi, now you will get a Zomato page because the Zomato page is a little richer, right? So technically we call it bundling and unbundling. So if you are running out of ideas, unbundle something from the bigger idea. So there is this startup in US, I'm forgetting the name. They let you order, it's like Swiggy, right? But only for authentic Chinese food that Chinese people will order, not like what Americans will order, right? So they've just unbundled one part of, one category of restaurants, which is coherent to one segment of users, right? And it is doing decently well from whatever I read, right? So you can always unbundle, irrespective of what is the size of the company, what, whether it's Google, Facebook, whatever, right? You can unbundle just one feature out of it and make sure it is better than what that bigger company has done. And it appeals to one particular audience, right? And from there, and you can keep adding more features, more market, more device capabilities, etc., and expand it, right? But that is the way to get a product. And to answer the other question, right? How do I stop somebody from copying my product? Basically, it's just about moving fast, right? If your product really can get copied, it will get copied. It means it has no network effect. In today's time, it is difficult to build a business without a network effect, right? Because if it's just plain software, it will become a commodity in few months, right? You figured out what to do, now somebody will just do it for cheaper and sell for cheaper, right? So either you keep growing your the target audience, saying I one simple feature but for a larger audience, hence I'm cheaper, okay? Or you add more sophistication to it and say this kind of detailing is not possible from other tools, like what Bill.com did. It's a public, it's a $1 billion company now, right? I mean, they kept adding features and it's so powerful that it's very difficult for a newbie startup to copy, right? So yeah.
Right. Right. And actually, a very good example of unbundling is essentially what's happened in fintech in the last 4 to 5 years, right? So, Razorpay, in fact, is one of them. So earlier, if you had gone to the start of the decade, you right, the early 2010s, the bank used to be one place where you did everything, right? That's no longer true. Folks like Razorpay have come and they have created a very unique product in payments. But now they're also bundling other products with that, right? So you do payments, but you also do lending. You also have a neo banking product. So, Kanchan, do you want to talk about how your approach has been at Razorpay for now?
Yeah, so I mean, great points that Naman has actually, he has opened like a Pandora's box. And how I see to it is that so bundling and unbundling, all of it, again, it stitches back to the fact that how we went about it is that when we were talking to our customers, right, we identified that, let's say, so right now, for example, Razorpay X is a neo banking platform, and it is one of the first movers, but we do have competition now. And maybe a few years down the line, we don't know what will be the share that they pick up and what will be the share that Razorpay picks up. But how we approach it is that whenever we talk to our customers, we identify what kind of role the person has in their own organization and what kind of role are they actually following on our platform. So there are personas of, let's say, a chartered accountant or a finance executive or an entrepreneur. The needs and the different bundles that they require are all different. So then that's how our ideas emerge, right? That okay, so we have entrepreneurs, we have owners who are paying salaries to their employees through Razorpay X. So why not we have a product specifically dedicated to them, which will give them better ways to disburse their salaries. Same way, we have a product called vendor payments. We were noticing earlier that a lot of our payouts were happening to vendors, right, from the from our merchants. So then we released an app specifically for vendors, which is called vendor payments. So I think bundling, unbundling, duplication of ideas, or executing of the ideas that you have, all of it, if it is done with a vision or with a consideration of the customers whose problems it is solving, I think it all then falls into place. So that's how I approach it, and that's how because it's a very fair problem, right? And you do tend to get confused that what is new that I'm building, or what if I have this amazing idea, and what if 10 other good people copy it, and there are giants who can copy it, right? So that is how one should keep their direction very targeted.
Yeah. I completely agree with that because if you take, I mean, let's just look at the company I work for, right? So Amazon Web Services. We built something that we thought we would only use for ourselves, and we were most people didn't think what we built actually worked, right? So when I say that is for the first 6 years we had literally no competition because people didn't understand the market. We understood it. We understood it. We understood the requirements. That gave us the head start. When other competitors started doing, they started copying what we did, right? But for us, we just kept innovating. And like, you know what Naman and you said, we do some of the very same things. Like 90% of our product roadmap comes straight from customer requests. We have the PFR document where, you know, we take customer requests and we prioritize the top ones. And 90% of our product roadmap actually comes from there.
Wow.
And when you keep building that, what we have realized is, and for us now, for example, AWS has 50% more services than the next nearest competitor, right? So you have to keep innovating, right? So it's the unbundling and bundling, as Naman put it, right? Um, there's an interesting question which has come here. It's a little long, so bear with me. Um, and this is from Kushal, and he says that in today's fast-paced market, how can a PM keep up with the needs of the market and limitation of his engineering team? For example, during demonetization, online payments shot up astronomically. In such situation, it's needed for a payment service to upgrade and launch within days. How can a PM manage to accomplish identifying, designing, and implementing new features and get them to market before competition?
Okay,
Uh,
so go ahead, Kanchan.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. So, yes, this is the biggest problem that a PM faces, and especially when the technology is new, or when you're trying to innovate, or when you're trying to disrupt a market, this problem will always come. I wouldn't really say that limitations of the engineering team. It's more of, I would say, like it comes as a byproduct of engineering, because it's not something that is on pen and paper. They have to constantly think of the codes, think of the solutions, and then think of ways to integrate it with the other product stack they have. So how one should approach this is that there should be constant conversations with your engineering team to understand the kind of skills firstly they possess, and to understand where the market is tending towards, right? So and this is a PM's job. So basically, for example, how I approach this is that I analyze the data, and whatever I talk to customers, and whatever needs I get, and whatever ideas I think I should be working on, I run my engineering team through those ideas in my daily stand-ups, or in our sprint planning meetings, right? And that's how they are also aligned on the vision that we have, and sometimes they come up with great ideas. We have hackathons in which so many of our website problems are solved only by engineering teams without any product involvement, and then it turns into a bigger feature which goes on to the product team. So I guess the best solution for this is to communicate with them about the new developments that are happening, to keep them up to date with what your customers are wanting, or what the market is expecting, and to encourage them to build apart from what they are supposed to build.
Right. So just adding to that, what the question actually states the primary job of a product manager. A lot of time people think the product manager's job is to come up with new ideas, right? New ideas are with the customer support team, it's with the sales team, right? It's never with the product manager. The product manager's job is to prioritize those ideas, to actually evaluate what is the end result. If I implement this, does this impact my revenue? Does this impact my, engagement or acquisition, or, and by how much, right? That is their primary job. And a product manager is required because there is limited resources of engineering. If I had unlimited resources in engineering, I would never need a product manager, right? If there is, so, what you're trying to say is, because my engineering is limited, my job becomes tough. I mean, your job is required only because engineering is limited, right? And second, as Anjan said, right, like you talk to your users, you also talk to your engineers, right? Maybe with certain features, you are estimating, say, it will take 10 days to develop from whatever knowledge you have. But when you talk to the engineering team, for them, it's like just a configuration change in the backend, because they are already accounted for such a need when they started out building the product, right? So when you're talking to the engineering team and then do a cost benefit analysis, saying this feature will take 3 days, the benefit is not so much. This feature will take 2 hours, and probably there is equal benefit, so I'll go after this feature, right? The game is about prioritization, and you can never go with like a laundry list of things saying do everything for me, right? That will never happen. It means you're not doing your job, right? If you've come up with 20 things to do, uh, and that is what makes you think, right? I mean, when there is resource crunch, you actually sit down and think, what is my next step, right? If there is no resource crunch, you are free to do whatever. You employ like 50 different teams, with 100 different engineers, and we've seen startups doing that and failing, right? So that resource crunch is what actually makes you think, and that creates your job, basically.
Yeah, and talking about the demonetization part, right? So this is actually a fantastic case study. Working like both of you said, working closely with your engineering team is very important, because as product managers, you want to know that your product is scalable, right? You want to know that if this product catches fire, like goes crazy among the audience, that it can scale from a tech perspective very easily. And a good example actually has been Razorpay itself. So and this is there on our website as well. So when Razorpay was migrating their entire tech to AWS in India, right, because of the new regulations which were supposed to come in from RBI. This was way back in 2016, and demonetization happened. So it was a major project during which demonetization happened. But Razorpay was architected well, which means that they had auto scaling and they had load balancing enabled, right? So as the volume of payment transactions grew, they were able to grow along with it, and they managed to grow very well with that. So that's a good example, and I think that was a good example of where product and engineering work well together. The other example I would give is, we had another customer called Patience. We have another customer called Patience, which was acquired by PayU, a lending customer. And they noticed, and this is coming back to Naman's point, by the way, where you might be surprised that the engineering team will have alternatives, right? So they wanted to build a social graph for lending. And they had this internal roadmap where they were going to create their own database, and it would take them 18 months to do it. It turns out that AWS already had such a product. We had a graph database which served their needs called Neptune. So they were simply able to use Neptune, and they cut short like over 1 year of product development time, just because the engineering team was aware of the product, right? So just wanted to highlight a couple of these points where we had these examples of working closely with cross-functional, working as a single cross-functional team when you're developing and scaling a product. So we have another couple of questions, and I'm going to come to that because we are running. Just to confirm, I think we have around 10-12 minutes more, so I'm going to get to some of the more other audience questions. The next one is from Ashish. How can we? What are the strategies you can use to make your product adoptable? So I'm guessing they have launched a product, but it hasn't seen the rate of adoption that they wanted. So what do you do then? How do you tweak the product till you get that adoption?
Okay, so I'm assuming that the product is actually required, and hence, but you are not able to drive adoption. It basically, in sales you say, right, no time, no money, no hurry, and there's 5 more things, right? No trust. Right? In a product, there is a risk that is involved, right? I'm going to invest 10 minutes in trying your product. Is it going to be worth, right? Can you buy out my 10 minutes? Okay. So basically, discount incentives work. Second is trust works, right? If you get endorsed by somebody who is like very, very popular, or somebody product will get adopted. So again, your first 5 customers you should already know even before attempting the product, right? And the 6th customer will be brought in by those 5 customers. Or you look up the persona and you go to the 6th customer saying, my product is being used by all the travel sites of India. So can I go to the travel sites of Indonesia and sell the same product? Something like that, right? But otherwise, you reduce the risk, which is give some kind of discount, and it really really works. Okay. I don't know if you guys know, but Coca-Cola was the first company to create coupons, right? And they actually made people try their sodas through coupons. They gave out coupons outside a university, and this works basically, right? You may call it bribing the user or whatever, but just reduce my risk of trying your product by whatever means, right? And the shortest way is to incentivize the user, which works fine.
All right. And uh, do you need a PM, a product manager on day one of a startup? Right? How early should founders think about hiring a product manager?
So with a startup, the product manager should come in only after the product market fit is attained. Okay. You are the product manager because you thought of it. You think you have the capability to build it. You think you know who is going to buy it, right? Now, if you think you are going to get a product manager in without a product market fit, you are going to be wasting a lot of money, right? Because this is like a borrowed vision, right? If you're going to hire somebody, for that person, this is like a borrowed vision, which is very very difficult to crack. Okay, you might want to talk to a lot of people, right? People who are product managers in other companies, or people who are founders of other companies, related industries, right? That is okay to do, but you cannot. I mean, product market fit, again, it's easy, right? I'm not talking about measuring a lot of metrics, etc. Right? What I'm saying is the user asking for more features? Are people willing to pay for it? Those kind of basic stuff, not getting detailed into data. But I don't know, product manager, it should come in a little later, right? When you're very specific that, okay, this is the problem set I want somebody to take over, right? Or some particular, so assuming my product is successful in India, now I want to take it to another geography, then probably I'll hire someone, right? My product is successful with, again, geography wise, or one of the unbundling factors, right? Geography, device, or whatever. And then I will hire a product manager saying, this is how it is done in this environment. We are going to try another environment. Can you take over, right? But you cannot expect a product manager to take over, like a borrowed vision. So.
And a follow up on that, when you hire product managers, right? Who should they report to? Should it be CMO, or should you have a new CPO,
Okay,
or
so
should it be the founder and CEO?
First product manager, I'm assuming you are probably, say, a 20 people team, you're reporting to the CEO, right? Or if it is very specific to a very specific domain, I'll look at what matrix it is, right? Does this matrix in second order or third order roll up to revenue, or does this matrix roll up to user acquisition? Depending on that, I would look at whether where this guy is reporting. But in most likelihood, I'm assuming it will report to a CEO, because it is the CEO's work or the founder's work that has been dedicated to a product manager, right? So nobody else will understand better. Second, it's a cross-functional thing, right? I mean, the way I look at product management is 51% marketing, 49% engineering, right? So, you cannot be reporting to the engineering manager. You cannot be reporting to the marketing manager, right? You are probably just trying to stitch between the two departments, right? So in most likelihood, you are reporting to the CEO, because you also need that kind of authority to run anything through, right? Otherwise, if you have a hard time with a hard engineering manager, nothing will get through, right? So you need those, veto powers coming in.
Right. How is it in Razorpay, Kanjal? How do CPMs report?
Right. So again, we directly stitch back to the founders itself. And we work alongside the tech teams, alongside the product marketing management team, alongside the strategy team. So we have our counterparts in all these teams. And a product manager is typically answerable to the founders. And we have like we have a team of product managers, senior product managers, and the associate directors, but like the entire product team goes back to the founders.
Understood. This is a very interesting question. This is slightly different from the previous question, so I'm going to take this. And the question is, how can an entrepreneur or an engineer switch their profile to a product manager and join other firms? Is there any online course material or certification? How can they go about this?
Right. So there obviously is online certification. One can go to, let's say, a B school. I went to a B school, and from there I got hired as a product manager. There are various avenues, but I will touch upon what you can do in your existing profiles to really be highlighted as a potential candidate for a product manager, which is doing all the things that a product manager does, right? So, stakeholder management, communication aspects, marketing, analytics, and understanding the technical aspects of a product, how it is built, and customer research. So, these are the five, six main pillars that you should be working on no matter where you are. So a lot of engineers come up to me and they say they want to transition. How is it possible? Is it even possible? Yes, it is, but you will have to go beyond what you're already doing today, and you'll have to probably take up a few projects, or you'll have to take up a few initiatives which show that you have the abilities of actually managing multiple stakeholders. And um, I mean, as a product manager, you should understand a lot of tools, or you should maybe know how to use a couple of project management tools, some technical tools, etc. But it's not a must. It really depends on which company do you land up in and which tools that company use. So more than the hard skills, I would say the soft skills of managing people, projects, and product aspects is what you should try to learn wherever you are, in whatever role you are doing. In terms of the course material, there's a ton of course materials. Probably I can share it with Rab and Trupti, and I have a YouTube channel of my own where I share such content where people can just um, go to the respective materials and learn from that. But I would always say that practical experience does not, there's no alternative for practical experience.
Understood. The other question is, let's say you're building a product and you're in early stages, right? So the question is, should you look at how do you make the decisions between build and buy? So there's some features that you think a product should have. Now you can either build those features or you can buy it from a third party service, a third party product that already exists. So how do you make the decision of build versus buy?
So I think it is always buy, okay? And if it is not available to buy, only then you build, okay? Because you are actually short of time. Uh, you are generally not short of money when you are trying to do such things, right? The other way of looking at it is this core to your product or not, right? The way I look at it is, am I going to release APIs or am I going to use APIs, right? So if it's a feature in my current products, assuming, we let people pay for invoices on our system, right? So we did not build our own payment gateway. We are built upon current payment gateways in the market, right? Secondly, if I'm looking, say, I'm going to let people insert data through APIs into invoicing system. So I'll build my own invoicing system, right? As far as possible, always buy. And if you can just stitch 5 products and, 5 different features from 5 different APIs and build a product, nothing like it. Okay. Build should be like the last possible decision that you take.
Got it. We are almost at the top of the hour, so I'm going to take another question, the last question most likely, and then we'll have the last word from both of you. Um, let's say your product is there and your product is successful, right? The question is, how often do you feel should one modify his product to come near to his customer expectations, which might keep changing from customer to customer basis, customer to customer basis, right? And the reason he's asking this is because each modification comes with a cost, right? From an engineering perspective, from a team size perspective. So how often should you modify products?
Right. So how I look at it is that there are two approaches, right? One is a push-based approach, one is a pull-based approach. So a push-based approach is when you see something going terribly wrong or something going really amiss from what you had expected. So let's say your adoption is not up to the mark, you can adopt some of the strategies that Naman had talked about. Or if your engagement is going down, or if your engagement is also fine but the growth is not there, right, or your core metrics are not being met, then you have to probe into the actual cohort that is there, which is experience, which is basically doing all of this. So let's say if there's a cohort which is dropping off, you directly talk to them or you analyze what made them go off. And of course there are certain things which you cannot get from the data, so then research is one more option, and you then pick out those problems for that cohort, and you see what percentage of the problem is it is a big problem or a small problem, and then you modify product features based on that. The second is the pull approach, wherein you directly you innovate, you think of certain market related trends that you foresee coming up, or you feel that in your product there is a huge opportunity for maybe bundling or unbundling something so that you can capture maybe another segment of the market, or maybe you can unlock some growth potential which you hadn't thought about at this point, and one feature rollout will help you that. Of course the cost benefit analysis always comes into play, but that's how both approaches can be used to make modifications.
Understood. Naman, any take from your angle on how often do you modify your product, for example?
So, sometimes what happens is we are failing in marketing and we think our, product is bad. Okay. And then we end up redoing our website or redoing something in the thing. Uh, if one thing is, when you're trying to modify, right, I'm trying to understand how big is the modification. Are you trying to say, I'll maybe change something in the product flow, right? Remove one step or add one step. In such cases, you should already know what is the end matrix that will move, right? If I'm trying to remove a step, does that improve my revenue, my acquisition, what, for which kind of audience, right? If a product is already made, you're trying to make changes and you cannot link it to a matrix, then I think the problem is not in the product, right? The problem is probably, say, your top of the funnel is too weak, right? Uh, I think again that is, and if you have to choose for retention and engagement, right? Once a product is made, there are some users coming in, right? You have feature sets for acquisition, for retention, for monetization. Choose for retention, right? Because you don't want to lose these customers that you already have, because maybe there is a feature that was 100% required, right? It was part of the system in your competitors tool or whatever, right? And if they don't get it, they'll fall off and it will be very, very difficult to get them back, right? So always choose for engagement if the product is already live and there are already users there.
Understood. I have a little different opinion here because Amazon does it a little differently. So, we do an update to any of our e-commerce sites like Amazon.com.in on average every 3 seconds, right? But so there's lots of updates actually going in, but those are very, very tiny updates, right? So you don't do major updates, but you do many, many small updates, right? So it's a little different approach that we take for products that are already successful. But of course, when there's new products, we take our time, like we discussed, to understand the customer and then launch. Super. We are at the top of top of the hour, and in fact, we are a few minutes above that. So, any last words, Naman and Kanchan, before we close? We close the panel, and I hand it back to Tripti.
Right. So I think for product managers, right, there was this interesting question of how do I switch to product management, right? And product managers now, there are enough courses on product management. Unfortunately, it's not taught in traditional, colleges, universities, etc. Right. What you have, and this is, when I look at engineers in large organizations, if you ask them, what are you working on, probably in a larger assembly line, they are like a small player in a very, very large assembly line. They don't even know what this adds up to, right? So as long as, even if you are a customer success team or you are an engineer or a designer, you have to know what is the end goal and why, are you doing this step, right? As long as you have these two answers, right, you will be able to create a better product, right? Whether you are the product manager, engineer, or designer or whatever, right? You should know what is the end goal. And I'll give an example. I was interviewing this guy, and he used to change hard disks at Wipro, right? So his role was, there's some client in US which uses for water management. They used to log whatever the water usage, etc. Their hard disk used to get full at some 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and that was his job, right? He was an engineer, he's a qualified engineer, and his job was at 4 a.m. India time. He used to change the hard disk, unport one and mount another one, something like that, right? He thought he's doing something very useful or very, very big, and this will convert into something great, right? But when you realize that, that the impact of your work and, does this work even compound? Right? It does not, right? I mean, somebody after 5 years, you'll be doing the same thing, and a fresh engineer can also do the same thing. You don't even need an engineering degree to do that thing, right? So if you understand what this rolls up to and why am I doing this particular step, as in the impact of this particular step and in the ultimate result, I think you'll do good as a product manager, or even if you're an engineer or a designer, you'll get that mindset of, why this product should be made. And that will take you through in most of the work that you're doing.
Understood. All right. Anything, Kanchan, before I hand it over to Tripti from your end?
Yeah, so
Closing
just
notes?
like to add to that, apart from the fact that you should be curious about why you are doing what you're doing, also if you have a personality or if you want to transition into product management, be ready to take up more than what you're expected to take up. Because as a product manager, there is no clear segregation of what belongs in my responsibility and what does not. I don't remember myself saying no for any task in the last 6 months that I was at Razorpay. And I'm not really saying that I'm a great product manager because I did not say no, but that's what product management is about, right? You literally everything and anything about the product is your responsibility. Maybe you're not the end person who will execute that task, but you still have to ensure that it is done. So that kind of a mentality, if you yourself inculcate and you depict in your resume, I think you can transition more smoothly into this field.
All
So
right.
thank you so much, like Trupti, Rab, and Sandeep, for having me. It was great listening to Naman's insights and your insights. So thanks a lot.
No, thank you all, and thank you to the audience for all those questions. It's been fantastic. Tripti, I see you're live now. I hand over the screen back to you.
Thank you so much, Kanjan and Naman. I see a lot of good feedback coming from the audience saying that it was a great practical learning session for them. And I think life became easier when the conversations keep free flowing and there's a lot of information that went out. Thanks, Sandeep, for being an amazing moderator as you always are. And we look forward to hosting all of you guys again sometime soon. And with regards to the questions, when we will be putting the video up, it should take another 2 days for us to post it. And we look forward to your feedback and your suggestions. Again, this topic was picked up because the audience wanted a topic to be touched, which covers this concept. So here you are, keep rolling that up. And if you can have the screen for the next session as well, Rav. So we are, starting off with another series this month, which is going to be for the entrepreneur well-being. This will be a holistic approach towards, the physical and the mental well-being of the entrepreneurs and anyone who wants to attend. So please do register yourself for this. We have Shamal, who is the coach for CEOs and elite athletes and celebrities as well. So that would be an interesting conversation to look out for. So thanks again, guys, and look forward to hearing from all of our audiences over the mails.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.